Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd Podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. There is talk that you can't flip a switch, but when I think there's a disparity between teams, like I think Boston will be much more engaged in the finals. Also, I think the last game of the NBA Finals is scheduled for late June. I don't know what they're going to do with this. I mean, are they going to start the finals Saturday night if Dallas closes it out? I mean, they may just. I look tonight. I'm like, how are they going to stretch this out? That's baseball makes that mistake sometimes, where people get into these series, and baseball is an everyday game. And then you get into a playoff series and there's 3 days off. Well, it's in the football season. It's October. You lose me. If if I want to watch the Braves and the Dodgers in the NLCS, you can't go 3 days off. You lose me. So I don't know what the NBA is going to do with their final schedule, but I do think Boston's a team. This is a team now. You go Marcus Smart to Drew Holiday. A little more of a legacy player. Porzingis has made some big time money, been viewed as a unicorn, a star. So I think it's hard when these guys look at Indiana and they're terrible defensively, they're awfully young, they probably wouldn't be here without some injuries to the Knicks. So I think, I was thinking about this, Jason. The two easiest ways to win a championship is to be part of a dynasty. Those are hard to construct, but once you have it, you have lots of players, usually a great coach. Dynasties get rolling, play with confidence. So, once you win your first or second with the Bulls, the third feels like it's easier. The second way is as an underdog that comes out of nowhere with no pressure. Dirk and the Mavericks over the Heat. The hardest way to win a championship is when you don't have one yet. We're expecting one for years, and you go in as a favorite. And I look at this Boston team, Dallas, I was thinking, we just put this thing together. We just shuffle the cards, threw it on the table. I think Boston is going to have a lot of pressure in the finals.
There's going to be a lot of pressure, and they're not going to. In all likelihood, Luka's the best player going into that series too, which is another interesting element.
Yes, yep.
One of the biggest lessons I've learned from this Dallas-Minnesota series is that we got to stop looking at the championship picture within the context of individual teams, but rather look at it through matchups. Because you go out of the second round and you're like, oh man, Minnesota, look at what they did to Denver. They have everyone's number. Clearly, they're the best team in the league. And it's like, well, actually, they have a very specific weakness, which is rim protection, because Anthony Edwards loves to get downhill and attack the rim, right? You go against Denver, who can't protect the rim, and you go against Phoenix with Yusuf Nurkic, who can't protect the rim, and it's just slicing and dicing them all series long. All of a sudden, Dallas has a freaky athlete in Derek Jones Jr. to put on the ball, and an elite couple of rim protectors in Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, and they look flummoxed. They look like they don't know what to do when the game really slows down. And so I have to kind of take that into the finals as well. And as we look into the finals, if it ends up being Dallas-Boston, Luka's going to be the best player in the series. One of the biggest issues for Boston, and it's a big part of why Indiana scored on them as effectively as they did, Boston has been the worst pick-and-roll defense in the playoffs to this point. And a lot of that has to do with Porzingis being out. But what do we know that Luka's going to do? Luka's going to pick on Al Horford every single opportunity he gets, just like you're seeing Indiana do so often over the course of the series, picking on him whenever they have an opportunity to in ball screens. And so honestly, there's a lot of advantages that Dallas brings to the table. That said, Boston does just have a ton of talent, and they have one specific thing that I think is super fascinating. Jayson Tatum is one of the few athletes in the league who's actually big and strong enough to cause some issues for Luka. And so I think that's kind of an interesting matchup piece going into that series. And so I don't necessarily think that that Boston's talent or Dallas having survived the West means anything. We got to look at this in a vacuum, and Boston has a lot of advantages. Dallas has a lot of advantages. It's going to be really interesting to dig into, but you're right. Boston is going to go into that series a substantial favorite. I think right now on DraftKings they're already something like minus 220 to win the title. Like, there's a ton of pressure.
Yep.
Again, if Jayson Tatum does get badly outplayed by Luka in that series after what happened with Steph in 2022, that would be a disaster. So I do think pressure will play a role, but I think Boston being at home to start helps. And the big time off helps a lot too, because you were talking about the final schedule. It's set. They're not playing game 1 till June 6th. So if Dallas wins tomorrow, there's going to be 8.
Is that true? June?
Yes,
6th.
there's going to be 8 consecutive days off if Dallas wins tomorrow. Couple things there. Luka's got a bad knee. That's really good for his knee. Kristaps Porzingis, a little bit of extra time to get back from that calf injury. So we could be seeing very different versions of both of these teams when we get to that point. For what could have been a much more entertaining conference finals, Dallas-Boston feels like a pretty damn good NBA finals. Aren't you excited about that?
No, I think I said this today on FS1. I worked today, and I said, this is as good as it gets. I have a huge brand in the Celtics with 2 stars who have played together for years, so people know the story. I've got Mark Cuban and Dirk Nowitzki made the Mavericks. They punch above their weight. That's a real brand. It's not the Lakers, Warriors, Celtics, but it's a real brand. You have 2 stars, one of them controversial, Kyrie Irving. You have the Boston Kyrie factor. You have the pressure on the Celtics to finally, come on, guys, you've been to a final, so you're going to have a favorite. This is as good as the NBA can do. I mean, I love watching Denver play, but I don't think they break through nationally. I don't think Minnesota does. I don't think OKC does. I think the Knicks will if they could get a Paul George or one more highly effective wing player. But this is really good. I think it's going to be a great final. I didn't know. I was just sitting here looking tonight. So you're right.
Isn't that crazy? Right. That's a long break. That's a whole playoff series.
Well, you're lucky that, because baseball's had long breaks, and it's just a killer in October because there's a college football or pro football. I mean, Fox is now running college football games on Friday. You just can't do that in football season. You can do it now. It's funny. My takeaway, I said this on the air today. If Porzingis plays, I like Boston barely, but I do think I'll tell you a series it reminds me of. 2000 Blazers, Lakers. The Celtics of the Blazers. Blazers had Arvydas, Steve Smith, and Scottie Pippen, and Bonzi Wells, and David Stoudemire, Rasheed Wallace. They had more quality players than the Lakers did. The Lakers had Kobe and Shaq and a really experienced coach. Multiple times in that series, the Blazers gave them fits. Lakers couldn't stop Rasheed Wallace. There were multiple matchup issues for the Lakers, but they had Shaq and Kobe. And I kind of feel like the league's never been this gifted offensively, ever. That's never looked like this. And increasingly in these series, it's just like, who's going to get the shots? I mean, Minnesota is the best defensive team in the league. People were targeting Rudy Gobert. It's like, that's the best defensive player. Go after him. It's a different ball game. When you got 7-footers that have to come and defend the perimeter, it's a different world. And I could just see this series, aggressive teams win. They went and got, first of all, they hired Nico Harrison from Nike. Then they get Kyrie. Then the trade deadline. They took big swings. And sports reward. So there's an aggressive culture with this team. And don't you feel a little bit like Dallas with Kyrie's temperament feels like, we should take advantage of the opportunity we have. This may not be in the oven.
This might be 1 year,
right? Like
1 or 2.
Well, yeah. Don't you think, Jason? There is a sense with Dallas, like, let's get this. This is the time. That Maverick Dirk team. It was a jambalaya. It was a bunch of stuff thrown together. That the tarmac wasn't very long on it. So the more I think about this, I'm like, man, it feels like 7. And it feels like Luka's going to hit a shot. It really does. Like, it's so hard for me. That Blazer-Lakers series, I felt 6 games. Hell, I felt going into the fourth quarter, the Blazers were the better team in the series. And then Kobe and Shaq do their thing. And do you have a strong feeling either way?
Yeah, so I find the dynamic to be super fascinating in the sense that Boston is this super talented team. They have 4 guys that make over 30 million, and they all deserve to. If they all were free agents tomorrow, they'd all make over 30 million. Yeah. And then Derek White is the one guy who doesn't. He makes like 18. And if he
Yeah.
was a free agent
Yeah.
tomorrow, he'd make 30, 35 million because he's so
Oh,
he's
oh yeah. He'd have a
yeah,
huge
he's
market.
arguably their second or third best player. I'd say probably their third best player, right? And so like they have an absurd amount of talent. It's very equal opportunity. We've joked on the show. It's like vibes. It's like you take this possession, you take that possession. It's like when they won game 3, it's like Drew Holiday just decides to randomly attack Pascal Siakam at the end of the game and get a bucket.
Jason, even Al Horford has nights. I mean, Al Horford could drop 23. You'd never be shocked.
Yeah, they almost look like a different version of themselves every night. Whereas like Dallas, it's like every single Dallas Mavericks basketball game I've watched since Luka got drafted has looked more or less the same. You know what I mean? Where it's like there's a corner 3-point shooter, there's a lob threat, and then there's a guy on the opposite wing, and then there's usually a secondary creator, whether it's Jalen Brunson or it's Kyrie Irving or it's Spencer Dinwiddie, right? And so what I find fascinating about the build is like this to me is the maximized version of the Luka Dallas Mavericks construction, right? You've got Luka playing the best basketball he's ever played in his life. You've got the best number 2 he's ever played with, Kyrie Irving, who's playing the best basketball he's played in a long time, right? And he's also defending at a much higher level than he has in recent seasons. They've got legitimate wing defenders. Derrick Jones Jr. was a veteran minimum contract who's been one of the best perimeter guys in the league. He's done an awesome job on Anthony Edwards in this playoff series. PJ Washington has been super valuable for them in all 3 rounds. And then they've got 2 vertical spacers, right? And so in Gafford and Lively, and both of them have been big time defensive threats for them at various points during the season.
Yes.
And so what I find fascinating is it's very much like a star driven construct with guys playing super focused roles. Guard the other team's best player, hit a corner 3. Protect the rim, screen and roll hard with Luka. Like they have super focused roles versus Boston, where it's like everyone's kind of a Swiss Army knife doing something different on any given night. Even defensively, they'll have Tatum guard a center. Yeah. They'll have Drew Holiday guard a center. They'll put Al Horford on Pascal Siakam because that's an archetype he has success with. So it's like I find it really fascinating that they're 2 very, very different team constructs. That said, like one of the things that I worry about for Dallas in the series is they have the ability to put some more size and strength on Luka than Minnesota does. What I found really interesting in the Thunder series, Lou Dort, built like a linebacker, caused Luka some problems. Jaden McDaniels, a more highly regarded perimeter defender, is getting bullied by Luka because he's skinny and gangly, and Luka can just shove him off and get wherever he wants. Tatum's got some real size and strength. Jaylen Brown is a more strong and stout lower base than a guy like Jaden McDaniels. Drew Holiday is a famous like fire truck built, like really low, strong kind of base. So they have a lot of big, strong bodies to throw at Luka. And then the second piece of it is one of the big reasons why Minnesota's offense is struggling so bad in this series is they're really struggling to get the ball to the weak side. And Anthony Edwards is struggling to dissect their defense with their aggressive coverages. Boston is awesome at getting the ball moving around to shooters. And like they will get you in space. And one of the things they did until Halliburton got hurt, they literally every single time down the floor were targeting Halliburton. Every single time, whether it was through Tatum and Brown or Tatum and Derek White, or whether it was through Jaylen Brown and Drew Holiday, they were attacking him every single time. They will do the same to Luka, and they will try to wear him down. And so I would say that I lean towards Boston as well, but I do believe that this Dallas defense is really good. And if they can play Boston into some poor shooting performances, if a guy like a PJ Washington or a Derrick Jones Jr. can have a similar effect on Tatum that some other guys have had in the past, like Andrew Wiggins did in the 2022 finals. If they have some success there, I think they have a shot, but I would lean Boston at this point.
Yeah, I mean, even getting the kid out of Duke, Lively, who was viewed you don't get many players out of college basketball that can play, not only in the NBA can play, but play for a really good team and get minutes. So it's like Dallas even throws that at you, where they get a college kid. Now, I don't know how much, again, the finals are different. Like it feels really different. The finals even feel different than the conference finals. There's much more tension. I don't think Boston has played with even, they feel like they're playing at about 80%. Like this game was a great example where I'm like, oh God, if I have to have another TJ McConnell shot, give me a break. And I just felt like, okay, this 7-point lead is going to evaporate. And then all of a sudden you could just sense it was like, okay, Boston started getting a couple of really nice defensive sets. Then they hit Derek White from the corner, and you're like, okay, Boston really picked their spots to be engaged, and they were good enough. I don't think that's what we'll see. I think they know what they're in for. I'll say this again. The most fascinating part of it is Tatum will sign a big. So Jaylen Brown got his money. Porzingis has his. Derek White has some, but Jason Tatum's going to sign his max when the season's over. So you'll be fine if they don't win it this year for one more year's run. But if you lost to Dallas this year, next year would be so pressurized for Boston. Like, this is it, fellas. So I kind of feel like you want to get it now, not later, because once Tatum signs, it's like, okay, guys, this is it. We got no bench. You can forget your bench. It's over. Connie, I'll circle back again. I think that's the one thing about Boston. I could see them getting really tight in this series.
Well, and to your point, as you get into the future, there's also the second apron rules that come into effect too, where Boston could be very handicapped in terms of what they're, or handcuffed, I should say, in terms of what they're allowed to do to do things to supplement the roster. Like you can't even use the taxpayer mid-level exception when you're in the second apron. Like you can't even sign anybody unless it's a veteran minimum contract over the summer. Like there's a lot of restrictions that come into play when you have that type of salary on your roster. I think like the big key to watch is Jayson Tatum. Like if they lose and it's a competitive 6-7 game series and you feel like Tatum goes toe to toe with Luka, you're fine. But
yeah,
the one thing that I think would actually be real crisis for Boston is what if they go in and they lose in games in the NBA Finals and Tatum's bad? Because if that happens, it's like, oh wait, this whole construct is flawed because our best guy can't go toe to toe with the other best guys. That would be the catastrophe. And because at this point, it's like, man, we are 2 whole years removed from that Steph Curry incident in 2022 when he was amazing for 3 rounds and then just completely fell apart in the NBA Finals, right? And so like I think that's the one thing that would cause me to like really press the panic button if I was Boston. But even if they lost, if Tatum looks like he kind of met the level and kind of met the moment, then it's like, man, next year we're definitely going to get it done. Like that's where you start to feel really confident. And by the way, you know, Tatum has been frustrating offensively in this playoff run, but we do not talk nearly enough about what an impactful defensive athlete he is. He's big, he's strong, he's faster than most of the guys, he's long. He can guard centers. He could like, it's so funny watching how like anytime anybody tries to isolate or do something against Tatum on an island, it's just hopeless. Like he just swallows them up because I'm really, really excited. That's one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to in the next series is like, how many times are they going to watch Luka, you know, bully Drew Holiday, bully Derek White, bully Jaylen Brown before, you know, Joe Mazzulla goes like, all right, Jayson Tatum, you're guarding him. And I really want to see that specific matchup. But like, yeah, I'm more on the patient route with Boston because they are still so much younger than people think. Like Tatum is, what is he, 26 now? He's barely entering in the phase where we expect great players to win. He's barely there.
Think about, let's just rank the top 10 players in this final Mavs Celtics. So Luka 1, Tatum 2.
I'd probably go Jaylen Brown 3, right? What about you?
So would I. Okay. I think just a sturdier athlete, a little bit more consistent. I would probably go Kyrie 4. I mean, because of Porzingis' health, God, do I go Derek White?
I'd go Derek White 5. Yeah.
Okay, Derek White 5. If Porzingis is healthy, I'd go Porzingis 6.
Drew Holiday's probably 7.
7. Then I go PJ Washington.
Yeah, probably PJ Washington.
Okay, so that's 8. Gafford.
I'd go Lively probably. I think Lively's a better defensive player and a better passer than Gafford. Gafford's really good and he gets slandered, but I think Lively's a little better than him.
Okay. And who's our 10th best player?
You probably go in Horford's got to be somewhere in there. Like Horford hit 6 or 7 threes in a game the other night. Like, I mean, like,
I know. Listen, you give him that corner 3, dude, he finds himself like, you can say what you want about Al Horford. He's had a more than redeemable career. Really good veteran, hits open shots, tends to play above his weight in big spots. Like, never an anxiety player. Like he's always ready to play. Sometimes with Siakam, he's just not quick enough. Like you can get eaten up with him sometimes. Boy, that's a lot of talent. We had to get to like 8 or 9. So I mean, one of the things Dallas doesn't deal with is they don't have a lot of bad half court offensive possessions like Minnesota does. Like they're just awful looking. Indiana's got some clunky ones. Boston doesn't, and Dallas doesn't. It will be aesthetically a really attractive series. It will be like fun, good ball movement, great. I mean, the degree of difficulty with Luka is insane. I mean, he hits shot because he's not a big jumper. He's not twitchy fast. So almost everything he's dealing with a hand in his face. He is the great tough. They always said Phil Mickelson was the great tough shot maker in golf. Luka's the great tough shot maker. I mean, he makes more things. He even turns to sometimes the wrong side, like, and he'll shoot a follow away. And I'm like, God, why'd you make that so hard? It's a 14-footer. I think it's going to be aesthetically a lot like the Warriors Celtics series, where you can't take your eyes off it. It's just really good.
Yeah, Luka's. I did a film session on him this morning because the end of that game I thought was super fascinating. How like it was 104-104, and I don't think anybody thought Minnesota was going to win that game. And it starts with a big mistake. Anthony Edwards leaves PJ Washington wide open in the corner. It's a 3. It's 107-104. But from there, down the stretch of the game, Luka and Kyrie made 3 tough, contested pull-up jump shots. Minnesota didn't get a bucket until Anthony Edwards had this garbage time layup. But I want to just zero in really quickly on the Luka shot over Jaden McDaniels. It was the last shot he hit because he hit a fadeaway over Naz Reid, and then he hit one over Jaden McDaniels. And Jaden McDaniels, by the way, I think he's the best perimeter defender in the league. He doesn't match up well with Luka because he's not very strong. But in terms of all the little things that make a perimeter defender great, I think he's got the full package. And Luka hits this, like you said, a funky kind of release. He hit a shot in the first half against Nickeil Alexander-Walker where he did awkward kind of reverse footwork where he took like a leaning forward kind of floating jump shot in the lane. He faked that shot against Jayden on that final possession, and Jayden left his feet and got out of position, and then Luka immediately spun out of it over his right shoulder into a fadeaway and barely got it off and hit it. And I was literally sitting there thinking, like, he's going against the best defender in the world, the best perimeter defender, in my opinion, and he literally has to get a shot off in this situation. And he actually gets him to leave his feet, and it's just enough to barely get the shot. It's like literally a game of inches, and it was based on a fake. I went through my film session today, and I showed the shot that he takes, and then I showed the fake, and then I went into the shot that he took. And I was like, this guy he is the most improvisational shot maker I've ever seen. He can tweak the angle. He hit a step back 3 over Karl Anthony Towns in the right corner in the fourth quarter where he jab stepped and then went a step back. Karl Towns almost blocked it, so he just shot it way up in the air. Just shot a moon ball, and it just went way up in the air, and it came down. And I was like, so he just tweaked his whole release and changed the geometry of his shot to get this shot off, and it went in. Like, he is the most creative and audacious basketball player I can remember watching. I don't love everything about Luka. He can complain sometimes. I hate the way he talks to the refs all the time. Like, there are some things with Luka that drive me crazy, but as a basketball fan, the shot making it's like art. It's like art with Luka. It's so much fun to watch.
Yeah, I always felt Kobe didn't have as many stock moves as Michael, and Kobe went down and the canvas was pretty bare sometimes, and you spill a lot of paint. There were some bad Kobe stretches, whereas Michael always went back to 2 or 3 like standard mid-range moves, which he just owned. And Kobe was willing to be a little bit more of an artist. He had spots on the floor he liked, and so does Luka. All great basketball players have spots and comfort levels. But Jesus, there's just nothing like him in the planet. There's just nothing like Luka. All right, Jason Timpf, Hoops Tonight. Can't wait. I think we're going to have, sorry, Minnesota, we're already counting you out, but I think it's going to be one of the most dramatic, pressurized finals and one of the most beautiful offensive finals we've seen in a long time.
Totally agree. Can't wait. It's going to be fun.